wanted to introduce my dear friend and mentor, Julia Molloy, who's going to talk a little bit about, not about the Bold Summit, but about what she really does. And this is how I first met her in 2006, 5, something like that. Long ago.
I don't even remember.
Long ago. And she gave a presentation that must have been all of 35 minutes. I was first in line to talk to her afterwards, and I told her one thing. I don't want more clients. I want the right kind of client. She, my partner at that time, and I hired her. She came, spent time in New York. She interviewed everyone in the firm. She wrote an operations manual. She gave us procedures, and we followed those religiously. And in 2 years, our turnover went from 150,000 to close to $1 million. Our turnover of fees, which is just exciting. So she's an amazing woman, very powerful. You all know her anyway, but please applaud Julia Molloy.
Thank you. Thank you, Benjamin. How are you all doing so far? How was lunch today? Good. Is it intense enough for you? Are you guys burnt out? Or are you good? Well, I told you I'd be working you hard, so hopefully you did take my recommendation and get plenty of rest and eat your Wheaties and be ready. You know, today, as I mentioned, yesterday was more outward-facing, and today is more inward-facing. Did you sense that so far? Did you feel the difference? Who liked yesterday more than today? Who liked today more? You can't make a choice. Okay. All right, very good. Well, we're going to dive into a little bit deeper into some of the logistics. And for some of you, some of it's already done, and you're all at different phases in your growth curve. The one thing I can tell you is that because you're here, most of you invited personally by me, it's because I identify you as somewhere on that growth trajectory for luxury. And I think luxury is misunderstood. And you know, everyone has a different explanation of what that might be. I always say luxury is elevation, and that's what you do for your clients. That's your gift. And I believe that luxury comes from the inside out. And that's really where my work has kind of revolved around, is starting at the core, who you are, what you want, aligning with that and being really clear and intentional about what you are creating, not only for your firm, but for your life. And then we create congruencies across all those platforms, okay? And that has to start internally. So when a client comes to me and says that they want a luxury branding package and all of this, and then I really generally go with them into their internal inner workings, because you don't want a luxury client if you are not functioning at that level. I've actually seen it a couple times, and it's one of the most painful things ever, and really bad for your reputation. So you don't want that until you are functioning at a really high level. So that's what my firm's been doing for the last 10 years. And I mean, I started out running an interior design firm, and Christopher Grubb is actually here. Where are you, Christopher? Are you back from lunch? Oh, he's coming in. He knows all this stuff because, you know, we go way back. But I came from high tech, and I grew from a group of 35 to over 108, 3 countries. We sold my divisions for $65 million. I've got a real ops mind, and I also have, as oddly as this is, a computer graphics and graphic design marketing degree, actually. But I ended up falling into operations because it's really what I love. That's the creative process for me. It's like, make this move over here, and this person, and overlap, and do it like this. That's where it comes alive. And what I have found from that time, and Christopher was a really great example because his office was really a great place to train in this industry. So bringing that operations into the design industry was pretty awesome. And when I left Christopher's, I'm not a maintainer, he'll probably tell you that. I'm good at setting things up, and then when it's running and smooth and lovely, then I'm like, I don't know, I'm a little bored. So I need that next challenge. And I was intending on taking some time off. But I guess word got out, and Lance, at Studio Webware actually, it was Studio IT back then, he found out and he said, hey, do you want to train the designers in LA on Studio Designer, it was back then. And I said, I would love to, I love teaching. So that's really how I got my start in this business. And it's interesting because it grew so organically. I didn't like go into it going, oh, that's what I'm going to do for a living or whatever. But I would go in and I didn't do this, it just kind of, it was created for me because being a brand new consultant trainer or something, I was being invited into Michael Smith, Barbara Berry's, Jeffrey Allen Marks, Madeline Stewart, like all of the LA designers, they're hiring and they needed someone to help train. So some of the clients are here in this room. Phil, where are you? Phil, Corinne? I think Phil. Phil is the base of that tree. Phil is the one who started it all the word of mouth, that referral. So what happened was that I would go into train, and then in typical form I would say, why are you guys doing it like this? Why don't you do it like this? Dink, 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 and I would just do that little thing. And I didn't even realize that it had a value. I was just like doing it. And then I started getting those phone calls saying, can you just do for me what you just did for Phil? And I'm like, sure. And then it evolved over that time. But what happened because of that? Hundreds of firms I got into the inner workings. And what I found was extraordinary. And I'm fascinated by patterns. And I found that there were distinct patterns in workflows, in procedures, in mindset, where the focus was in the business that I found were the distinguishers between the firms that were struggling a little bit and just the cash flow roller coaster and all those things that kind of come with the struggle state. I call it the struggle state, where it's like you're just trying to get up, up that, and you never start coasting a little bit. And so that's what I'm here to share with you all, and I know that I've shared some bits and pieces of this. I shared a little bit of it last year. I'm going to go into more depth. But I want to make sure that I address your needs. And I can talk about anything. I could talk about billing model and the contract. I've written contracts. I could talk about team and development. I can talk about emotional intelligence. I just got certified as an emotional intelligence certified practitioner, because there's a mindset and there's something that you generally are all very good at, but it comes into play with building your team. So I can go in a lot of different directions, and I will do my best to make some time at the end for a Q&A, so that you can ask specific questions. But I want you to tell me, what is the game changer? Like, if you learned it at this conference, if it has to do with kind of the inner workings and operations, shout it out. What would be meaningful for you?
Team organization.
Team organization. How many would like that? Team organization. Okay, I got that covered. Okay, I'll focus a little bit more on that.
Pricing structure.
Pricing structure. Oh, yeah. Oh, really? Okay. Totally. Okay. What else? Those two? Really? Okay. I'll do others. Obviously, I'll flow through. Oh, what else?
Billable versus non-billable. What do you bill for? What do you bill for?
Oh, I have a contract all written out for you guys. This work is already done. Okay. Take the shortcut. Okay. So I'm going to get into it. Are you guys ready? Okay, so this is not the most exciting topic on the planet. I am not Martin Lawrence Bullard. But one of the things that Keith touched on, and I think it's a theme actually this year. That word confidence. How many times has that word come up? Kelly talked about it. Kim talked about it. Keith talked about it. It's come up, and it's a theme, and it's something that I think the industry's been rattled, right? Yeah, it's been rattled. So we need to get our groove back on, mojo. And you know what? This is the thing. I don't think it's only about mindset, although it starts there, for sure. But I also think it runs through. And the work that I generally do with the clients, because I get like, oh, how do I bill more? You know, you guys call me. Usually when stuff's happening, you know, okay, I need help finally. I've been meaning to call you for 2 years, but now I really need help. Okay? So, you know, and I listen and I process it and then I give you that feedback. And what I would tell you is that confidence and a lot of those pieces that kind of make it click together are a result of not psyching yourself out like, I'm worth it. I'm gonna charge more. You know, I think confidence, true confidence, comes from just a knowing. You just know it. But how do you get that? You can't wake up one morning and go, I'm going to be more confident today. I mean, you should, like mantra and all that stuff, but, you know, I think you need to do some things. And when your processes are falling apart and you can't focus on your zone of genius because you're dealing with this and this and this and you're, you know, that mental chatter, I think Keith called it. He didn't call it mental chatter, but, you know, that background noise. That goes away when you do the internal refinements necessary to function well and feel professional and know you've got a strong contract that you feel good about, that feels congruent with your brand, that you know is going to work for your types of clients. And I recommend having a couple different models based on the type of project. When those things, when you're handing it out and it's congruent, when you're saying something and it's congruent, when a process workflow happens, like an install happens, or design process, or your ordering process goes smoothly, that congruency is where the confidence comes from. And you know what? A pattern that I've seen over the last 10 years I've been doing this, when you do it, and I'm going to be saying, oh, I know the best, and I know all the way to go for everybody. But I just tell you that what I have seen, and my clients have told me, is that they have gotten at least 35% back from their time. So what used to take them 100 hours is now 65, 70-ish. And that's a wonderful thing because you are more efficient. So when you up your fees, or when you say, yeah, I'm $275 an hour now, there's no energy incongruency there, because you're like, honey, I can run circles around whoever you're talking to about this project because I've got it down. And it's just an inner knowing. So that's the fruit that comes from this effort. Okay, because the actual doing of it is the minutia part, and much of it you'll delegate out. But you know, at a certain point in your growth curve, when you're at the boutique phase, 5 and under, that core 5 team member, I know you realize this, I'm sure, that's really important. Your core 5 are like gold, and they need to be the right fit in many ways. But going through that path requires some guidance, and you can do the trial and error, but why not just do it the easy way? And let's get those standard operating procedures in place. Let's get your procedures down. Let's get a workflow that's not chaotic. Let's get a team that actually works and is well tasked and knows their role, and there's clear channels for accountability, so that you really can step back a little bit and focus on your clients and the PR and all the things you're dreaming about and focusing on yesterday for the most part, and actually have the bandwidth of that extra 35 plus. You can't do it when you can't think about luxury and the final touches and the refinements when you're chasing your tail to get the last pieces into an install for tomorrow. Would you agree with that? Amen. It's not. So it's that hierarchy of needs thing, and that's like my inspiration for that triangle that I gave you guys. And has that been helpful for you? I mean, have you kind of engaged with that at all, or you kind of skinned over the triangle? I'm sure. But you know, you'll come back to these workbooks. You take them with you. It's okay. But I see the triangle as, and I know my slide isn't a triangle, but you've got it there. It's kind of like the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have these tiers of functioning that have to be in place in order for you to focus on the next tier. And that's how you become luxury, all right? Now, I want to define something here because I think it's an important distinction. It's not a style. It is quality, whatever that is for your work, for your clientele. It's a strata, but you define it for you and your firm, whatever that is. And I was talking to my dad, who I think I get the operations bug for the gene or something, because I just actually found out recently, like literally like maybe 3 years, probably not even 3 years ago. He works for General Motors. He's worked there his whole life, since 19 years old. And finally I'm like, Dad, what exactly do you do? I mean, they flew him out to Shanghai to actually build General Motors Shanghai, like whatever, 7-10 years ago. He was that guy. And anyway, I'm like, what exactly do you do? And he's like, well, when they're having a quality problem, with my dad talking, when they're having a quality problem, you know, they come see me. You know, and I analyze the steps, and I document the things, and I figure out what needs to be implemented, the tools. And he's the guy who invented the barcode system way back in the 70s. Barcodes were only used for one little industry. He's the guy that brought forth barcoding for parts so that you're regimented on the assembly line, and a whole bunch of car stuff I don't really care about. But anyway, he does what I do, but I do it for the interior design industry. I'm like, oh my God, you're kidding me. That's so odd. But one of the things that stuck with me, and he just told it to me when I saw him at Christmas, and he said, and quality is keeping your promise. Promise is kept. And it stuck with me, and I'm like, oh man, that is so right. And I thought about my industry, our industry. I'm like, it's different for everyone. I've worked with, and that's one of the advantages I think that I have, I mean, not next to like Keith Granite, but is that I've worked with hundreds of firms, from 40 teams to sole proprietors. Most of my clients are somewhere in the realm of boutique firm. Maybe a little smaller and working their way up, maybe a little bit bigger, working their way up, sometimes working their way back down. So it's right in that realm. And I can tell you that that promise is different for everyone. So you need to figure out what your firm's promise is. Do you know? Who knows? Who knows what their promise is? Can you think about that a little bit? Okay. So the big question is figuring out what your promise is, and how do you keep that promise? That's the hard part, right? So I work with you guys so often, and you get all these great ideas, and you want to make all these big promises, but it's implementation, right? Yes? Say aye. Aye. I mean, you don't have time to do all that. I mean, you're trying to design. So you have to build a system. Who here's read E-Myth, the E-Myth Revisited, or E-Myth? Man, you should all get that book. It's a story. The E-Myth Revisited is a story about like a kind of a sole proprietor, not in design, but you'll identify with some of those struggles. But the premise is that you build a system and let the team run the system. You know, it's not a perfect world, and it's not in design especially, it's not an engine. This isn't like a manufacturing warehouse or something. You put something on a conveyor belt and it just happens. But I see the difference between people that have those processes and them not running according to the procedure or the way of your firm is the exception rather than the rule, right? So these distinct patterns that I mentioned kind of go like this. First of all, as I said, congruency, professionalism, and polish. And you are going to have something different. Each one of you is going to have a different focus. Okay? Principle 1 is the company structure. And I hear you on that. A lot of you are growing right now. That's why I made this conference in particular about aligning for growth, because that's the calls that I'm getting lately. We've got too much work and we're drowning. Yeah? Okay. These are vague, but I'll go detail, okay? You need to be able to put a structure together, and that has several different components, that allows you to focus on your design concept, delegate that design concept to your designer. And I'm going to speak to the boutique model, and I'm hoping that if you fall a little bit smaller or a little bit larger than that, you make those connections, okay, as it's appropriate. So you need to focus, you need to be the brainchild behind the design. And then you need a team that you can have implement that, okay? And that goes designer, junior. By the way, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Designer, junior, and I see them as a team. I see it as a design team because I've seen it work and not work other ways. You know, I go into firms and usually they're struggling with something, and it's because either the support is coming from, there's just not support below, right? They haven't hired that junior on, or they hire a designer thinking they hire a higher level person to, you know, that's more skilled, and you know, you want that talent on your team, and that's great, but if you don't have a junior to support them, you are spending a lot of money for that super awesome designer that can't even really hardly do the super awesome designing stuff because they're too busy running around below. So they don't have support below, so the support comes from above, and oftentimes that's the designer. How many of you can relate to that? Yeah, okay. So when you're feeling that in your firm, it means you don't have enough support below, okay? I just had this conversation a couple weeks ago. They're running around, and it's because their designer was not really functioning as a junior. And if you only have enough for one designer, you get a junior. You don't get another high level, for most of you, okay? And anything I say, there's going to be caveats, because that's why I have the one-on-one conversations, and there's always a nuance, okay? But for the most part, that's going to be more effective. And that, you know, the higher end design, you might have to outsource a CAD person. Okay, I get that. Or maybe you're junior. A lot of them are really good at that. CAD is the first thing you outsource. But get that support below. And you might not be able to hire a designer junior at the same time, you know, but that's what you're striving for. That's what the structure looks like, okay? Principal and a design team, okay? Your job needs to be, with that support, focused on design concept, client acquisition, client relationships, and company development. Yeah, we can skip that. Strategically designed, you got this, just print it out. I want to get to the meat here. Components of that structure. And I have roles and responsibilities, and all of this is already documented, okay? I'm going to explain it to you in a nutshell. I literally have binders back there with every role and accountability chart in it, okay? But as I was saying, it's principal designer handling all of the concept that they delegate to their team for implementation. You meet every Tuesday, generally, for that design meeting, and give them that feedback Tuesday morning before lunch. And I would say for those of you who are feeling the pull of the admin side, how many of you are feeling the pull of the admin side? Okay, yeah, it's very common. Are you guys doing procurement also in your office? Yeah, that's very admin heavy. Okay, so you might have heard this. This is my recommendation. I've worked it both ways. I've seen it. And there are exceptions where I actually see it work in another way, but I've always seen it work better with this structure until you get to a certain size and you need your own expediter. But generally, that first hire, if you're at that point, you want to get an admin expediter, okay? Don't have your junior do it and your design team do it. And I know that they're close to that, and a lot of them don't want to let some of that go because they need to be in control of it. But when you have some systems in place, centralized information system, I'll talk about some of this, they can be in control without having to do it, okay? Very easily. So if you eliminate that fear of losing control and downgrading the quality, then you realize that the juniors, the design team needs to be focused on the design, sourcing, and creating a really quality product or service. And they handle everything pre-purchase order creation. How many of you are doing it like this already? Great. And then once the PO is created, it has everything on it. It has all the information that anyone could possibly need on this. They pass it over to the admin expediter. Okay, and that admin expediter is the one cutting the checks, doing the bank, well, maybe not the bank reconciliations, but they're doing the inner workings of the accounting, money in, money out anyway. And it's not, if you find the right expediter, admin person, they're going to be really good people. Persons. They're going to be good at communicating. They're not going to be, let's just say this, they have an emotional intelligence and they have a grounding and a maturity to their presence such that they can command the respect and help guide their vendors and build those relationships with the vendors as well as the people calling in to your firm. So that's a really important integral part of having that role be the front to your clients and to your vendors. And they're processing all of that. And they create the forms and the reports letting you know when things have arrived. They're following up. They're doing, okay, how many times, seriously, do you make a phone call or send an email trying to get the product that you just ordered where it needs to go? 5? How many? 7? So much time. Yeah. Seriously, this is where, and I saw it especially a few years ago, this is where people died during the recession. This is where, when we analyzed their money and all their labor costs, this is what killed them. They had design teams, they kept just a couple, right? And they kept the designer. And they were paying premium dollar for all of those little tiny things. The back and forth. You get someone who's awesome on the phone, really good at building relationships, is not going to be the person to go, oh, it's going to be another 8 weeks? Okay. Right? Dear God, help us. No. They're going to have that talent that you have where you can push and still be likable, right? Clear roles and accountabilities for your team. So many times when you're growing, it's organic. Everyone's pitching in and there's no clear lines, and that's okay for a little while, but as many of you are noticing, it's not sustainable. Like once you hit a certain point, that actually becomes problematic, and people are double dutying and they don't know who did what, and it becomes really confusing when the volume goes up. So that's usually when I'm getting the call saying, okay, it's time we grow up. We're big now and we need to figure it out. So we have really clear lines of accountability and some cross-training, and it doesn't mean that collaboration doesn't happen, but the buck stops with this role when it comes to this, okay, for everything. Okay, you can still be collaborative and it can still be kind of this kumbaya, you know, you're all on a mission thing. But trust me, your team will appreciate it. A lot of times I get the question like, I'm gonna get some resistance because my team, like, we're creatives. And I'm like, no. First of all, when you feel like someone's not working out, it's probably because, not all the time, many times people are ready to fire. It's not the person. You can put anyone in. If you have a little revolving door, especially you'll notice in one role. How many has experienced that? A little revolving door? Yeah. Just a little bit. Okay, that means there's some structural issues there. So you want appropriate funnels for action, okay? The other thing that's crucial, and it's easier now than it's ever been, is a centralized information system. You know what I mean by that? One system that all the information goes in, accessible to everybody, preferably mobily, and everyone can update it. It's easily updated. It's not a monster to maintain. And that becomes a key communication method, okay? Instead of, hey, did you call the vendor for oh, when is that supposed to write? You know, like that whole thing. You know, it's going to happen, but you're striving for those prolonged periods of high levels of concentration. And actually, one of the first things that I do when I enter a firm is I have them fill out a survey of like how many times you do something, and we kind of figure out like how many points of contact or back and forth of pieces of information. And the more arrows of like, oh, well, sometimes it's this person, sometimes it's that person. Well, I tell this person, and that person tells this person, and then she submits it. Like, the more little pass-offs, the more inefficient you are, the more mistakes happen, the more crazy you are. Okay, so we streamline. That's what it is. We eliminate those arrows. I go through and eliminate arrows, streamline. And it makes a huge difference, okay? But you need that tool to kind of act as the glue, so you're not always interrupting each other and everyone knows what they're supposed to do. I recommend, I've been working with Studio Designer for 10 years. I worked in being a part in helping firms. I've worked in Peachtree, MYOB, QuickBooks, Design Manager, Designer Logic, like there's a million. And it's been evolving. And I know Phyllis Harbinger, she really, really likes Design Manager. And I think if you're gonna, you know, those are the two. Like, don't deviate from that unless you have a nuance in your firm that doesn't require that level of sophistication. But I like Studio Webware for a lot of reasons. And there's also some other tools that allow you to communicate in a more streamlined way. And I'll touch on that in a second. So a couple things. And Phyllis actually was kind enough to share with us a little information last year, I'm sure you remember, on Wakora. So if you go to the design process, the proposal, the pre-proposal concept phase, what's what I'm trying to say. The concept phase, there's a lot of back and forth going on through that process, right? New selections, the clients are giving you feedback. One of the tools that we have found for that is Wakora. Who here has explored Wakora? Yeah? How do you like it? Yeah. I had someone who was here last year, and they said that it cut they implemented it after the conference last year, and it cut their process time for concept phase in half. So that one is great because it's kind of like Pinterest, but it's just private, and all the information on that website or that tear sheet or whatever it is lives there. You never have to find it again. You can show the pricing or you can hide the pricing. You can show the description, you can hide the description, and you can lay it out and say, these 3 chairs and this rug, and choose what color and all of the stuff. And they can give you feedback right on that screen, and you can put little notes. It's a really great collaborative tool. I recommend Wakora, and I don't know why they named it this. Wakora, WECORA.com. I should be getting a referral fee from these people. Okay. Wakora. And you know what? There are a few others that I've been kind of testing out a little bit that are very similar. But that one's time true tested. I know it, and it's awesome. It really is awesome. So try that for your design concept phase or something similar to that. If you are feeling that there's a lot of back and forth communication in that process, that could be trimmed down a little bit, okay? And also, if you have tech-forward clientele, they love it. They think you're smart and they respect you more, okay? Same with Studio Webware. Like, when you have that presentation. You can hide things, but they can approve things, they can pay for things, they can look at what they owe. Sometimes you don't want to show them how much they've spent, remind them, but you can if you want, right? And when you have those hyper-vigilant clients, you have to, because otherwise they're just like, and you can't relax their mind because they don't know if you have control. So you do give them that interface with as much information that they stop bugging you, right? We've got the design process, Revit, obviously, BMI for construction. Studio WebWare, as I said, I really like that one. It's integrated accounting. And my processes, I built these, what I've called now the business blueprint, interior design business blueprint, is based on a firm that runs Studio WebWare. Because, your operations and your workflow flows in and out of whatever technology you're working in, right? So it is based on that. Really, really important. I know establishing workflows and flowcharts and documentation is your favorite thing, right? Yeah, sure. Okay. So, but these are the 6 that I feel are the most critical. And a lot of this is just something that maybe is a little bit loose because it was originally you and you just know how to do it, and then you delegate some of this on, and then someone in your office kind of learns how to do it, and it just kind of evolves from there. It's a little bit loose. Sometimes we do it this way, sometimes we do it that way, depending on this and that and this and that. No. Not when you want to play with the big dogs, okay? You gotta mature, what they call maturing your firm, okay? So, client services, which I feel like it needs to come at the beginning and it needs to come at the end, because you have to start with that vision and that brand identity and do the best to convey that outward, and then you need to, again, put in the constructs to be able to make that happen internally, and then after you gain back some of that time, you revisit it, okay, because you will be transformed. And you revisit it again, and then you further refine your client services. And I like having the client services binder, like what the office manager knows. They're in charge of making sure that the welcome package goes out within a week of new client signing project. They have a VIP workbook so that any new client or VIP contact goes in that workbook. It can be digital, it can be binder, doesn't really matter. But it is a place where their birthdays, like some of that intake information that you take at the beginning, goes into it. What their favorite color is, what their favorite flower is, where what you bought for their last gift, so you don't do the same gift over and over again. Or like I have a client, she wasn't able to make it this year, but Miss Greeley, if she was here, she would appreciate this. Every year I send her flowers, and she has this special kind that she likes, and the special florist that's just down the street that's been doing her flowers for everything that she does for the last 30 years or something crazy. So I didn't follow my own rule, and I didn't have it filled out. I'm like, her birthday's coming up. I'm like, where did I buy that bouquet from before? And it took me like a half hour to figure out what florist it was and confirm, oh yeah, you do know her, and da-da-da. And I'm thinking, all right, this is why I have the VIP workbook. You just gotta maintain it. It makes a big difference. Stuff like that, okay? A little bit at the beginning, a little bit at the end. New client setup is huge, and it sets the tone for the whole project. I have a whole system about this. New client setup is where you set the stage of how you are going to run the show, your energy for that project. You establish the credibility and the trust level and kind of the way in which the project is going to flow with the client. You're setting the stage. And I've been in enough firms, I know what happens a lot of times if you don't have this process. Like, okay, I do this, check, check, check. The office manager just sets it up in Studio WebWare and sets up a file and gets the binders made and da-da-da-da, and check, check, check. The design team enters in the skeleton or the framework of every, entire scope of work that we know what we're gonna do. And some of you are using like Excel or some kind of schedule. I recommend do it in Studio WebWare, man. You don't have to enter it again. It's done. You've done enough spaces at this point to know what you're going to need for that space. You don't know the vendor maybe, But you know, you walk in the living room, you know you're going to need an area or the sofa. We're going to keep that chair, but we're going to keep, we need this, wall covering. Make a placeholder for it. You know what's great is when you get all of that out of your brain, it's awesome. You feel so much more clear. I hear that over and over again. So you don't have to wonder, oh my God, did I totally space buying at 4 o'clock in the morning? Because it's there. It's already there. And your team can be proactive for you because there's ways in which, like I have a method for using Studio Webware in a particular way that allows you to manage the process with the color codes and some of the reporting and things. So you can look up, I need to see everything in the Smith project that is fabric that has been ordered but not yet received in the workroom. You're doing this in your brain all the time. Get it out of your brain, and also get it to a point where it's available because it's centralized and everyone knows their role. You can walk out the door and say, I need you to pull 3 fabrics samples or examples for all of the fabrics in the master bedroom of the Blake project, and I'll be back at 4. And they have it there. They see, oh yeah, we've got duvet cover, we've got this, So those things make a huge difference. That new client setup is really, really critical. Your design process, who does what, when. Another thing in that design process, and Phil can attest to this because we just recently implemented this in his firm, I think earlier this year. What I have found is that design firms tend not to consolidate your moves. So, you tend to scatter your client meetings and your vendor meetings and your in-office meetings and running in and reviewing and doing the redlining and meeting with your designers. Like, it's all jumbled, like, throughout the week. Do you guys, how many of you can relate to that? It's like just, there's no difference between Tuesday and Thursday. Like, it just is all every day. So what I recommend is creating this office rhythm, and it is really powerful. I see firms just feel so much more in control, and it just flows better because you can anticipate what's going to happen next, and you've got a flow. So what I recommend that is, and I'll just tell you, and I don't have a slide for this. I'm just kind of focusing on what I feel like you guys need to hear. Monday's Team Sync. How many of you do a Monday Team Sync meeting already? Yay. Okay. Do you have what I refer to as a master task list? Yay. Okay. That means, is the master task list just your list and everyone has their own list, or it's one list? Yes. Awesome. Okay. Okay, so this is something new. So I, in my binders and my systems or whatever, I always just had created this Excel spreadsheet, and it used to be in Word, and it moved to Excel because you can sort and that kind of thing. I just discovered something from a client, actually, a new client. It's called Smartsheet. Have you guys heard of Smartsheet? Yeah, Danny has. So I implemented it in my office because I wanted to make sure that it works. We have our Team Sync on Mondays also. Actually, every other Monday during most parts of the year. It's got the benefits of like Excel. It's simple line item. So there's other tools. There is other tools. Basecamp, Asana is another one, especially if you're doing a lot of construction, okay? This is the deal, though. What I have found with most, at least boutique firms, is that they're too cumbersome. Have any of you experienced that in this room? Like, it's just too much. And so you don't update it because it takes too long. It has to be fast, easy to maintain. It was on the list a slide or two ago. And when you are most busy is when you need it the most, and it's when you're not updating it, and then you can't trust the information, and then you can't use it anymore, right? And you don't have the time to catch it up, and it's just, whatever. So use Smartsheet, man. That thing is awesome. And what I'll do, okay, so you're going to get all the recordings of this, of the whole conference. In that Dropbox, I will put in my little master task list template. And I haven't quite figured out when I publish that whether you're able to change the fields, but I've set up, like every master task should be priority column, like what's the priority? A, B, or C is usually how I do it. A is like right now, C is later, and I just need to get it out of my brain, right? The person accountable for doing it, and sometimes it's the client or the project or whatever that is, and then an area for the task. Okay, and this is another thing that many of you guys do, is your team sync meeting on Monday becomes a design meeting. No, it's just what needs to get done, when, and who's accountable for it. And, yeah, exactly. We're not talking about dimensions and did you go measure this and da, 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 right. So it is who is doing what when. And it's prioritized so that you don't have your junior designer focusing on something that doesn't need to get done for 3 weeks when there is something that needs to be done by tomorrow at 3. Right? Priorities, really, really important. So anyway, Smartsheet's great. It has all the columns I've already developed for you. You can hopefully modify. If not, you can just mirror it, and then heck, you'll have your own. Yeah?
That's similar to Evernote, or is that?
No, but you can attach notes. You can attach emails. You can attach. Oh, there's even this awesome little thing that looks like a little clock on it, and you click it, and it dings the person accountable for an update, and it comes in through email. Right? How great is that? And you can sort, like you can say, Smith project, junior designer, whatever, Joe, A priorities that aren't done. And you can sort that, and a short list comes up of all of those items, and that's their to-do list. Do it. Done. And you can print it out, you can email it, you can attach drawings to it, you can attach anything to it, and you can write comments and notes, and you can expand it as much as you need to. I have found it really great. Not as cumbersome as Excel, because I'm not an Excel. I don't know. It's just too accounty for me. For some things, spreadsheets, it's great, but I don't know. But it's great because, like in Excel, like if you find something in a line item, you can just hold it down and draw it down, and it'll move. Like it's fast and easy list versus like Asana or Dropbox or a Basecamp where you've got to like open up a screen and then you got to fill in all the stuff and you're like, I just need to just add it to a list really quick, right? So anyway, Smartsheet for that. Design process. Okay, yeah, design process. That's where I was. So team sync meeting, Monday morning, first thing. Everyone gets a half hour to sync up to answer the emails or whatever. You meet for an hour, no more than an hour and a half. It should really, if you're doing it right, it should last about an hour to an hour and a half. Okay, then everyone has the rest of Monday to figure out what, get the process started, figure out what questions they have for Tuesday morning. Before lunch, nothing is scheduled out of the office, including you. Okay? What this does, and you can add that on Thursday morning too. We had to do that for Phil here because there was so much work. They had to have Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings. So that's fine. But what happens is you eliminate that delay time that happens when your team doesn't have access to you, and they're like, "Well, I tried to order it, but you didn't give me the information I needed," and it becomes a rhythm, and what? Right? Okay? So what happens when you do this, though, is that it creates a rhythm. It's almost like a wave pattern. So it takes a couple weeks to actually take effect, but then the flow actually starts to coincide with when their needs are. Like it just kind of starts to happen that way. And then another thing I recommend, so you do that design meeting, and so that morning, Tuesday morning is design time. That's when on the calendar, it's always blocked off, and if you need, or anyone on the team needs to meet about a certain client, you just say Smith Project Living Room. So you don't have to schedule the time, you just maybe schedule what you're addressing. And then your design team has the ability, the time, and the knowing of when it's going to happen to plan for it, to have the questions ready for you in an organized fashion, to have it laid out so that you can make the final selections, to get the feedback, da-da-da-da-da. And it goes by pretty great. And then what happens is that you set Tuesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon, whether you're doing a design meeting also on Thursday morning or not. Tuesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon is when PO checks get cut in your office, so that your expediter admin is not another PO check. Okay, another PO check. You need it in there. Like, they can never again have those long periods of prolonged periods of high levels of concentration. And so you have your design meeting, they have enough to finalize a few things, and they know that if they get it in by whatever your cut off, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, whatever it is, if they get it in to the admin expediter, their order will go out that day. If they don't get it done, then it will happen on Thursday. And of course, I mean, we all know, I know you're thinking, well, what about that order that, you know. I mean, there will be occasionally something that's a fire, and whatever, that happens, but it's your rhythm. That would be the exception rather than the rule, okay? Does that make sense so far? Who here's going to try that? Oh, good. Okay, let me know how it goes. Purchasing process, you know, it's an involved process. Again, Studio Webware helps with that tremendously. If you use it the way I tell you to use it, it will change your life, for real. And then installation process. And I thought it was really brilliant. Remember how Kelly has an entire division for a punch list, right? Was that crazy? I mean, I'm not recommending you open an entire division for that punch list after an install, but man, you better have that process down, okay? And I do expect, or I would expect, that a firm that is refining their process for their clients and that signature experience has that very well documented and that experience branded a little bit. And I'll get into that. Don't let me forget to tell you a little bit about an opportunity for that. Documentation, you've got that list here. You don't need me to read it to you, okay? Very, 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 very important. And I know it's your favorite thing to do. But you need the protocols, you need the job descriptions, you've got to have the process flows. And you take those process flows for granted because you've been doing design, but I can tell you that your design team, especially in the newer ones, are so relieved when they just have it visually mapped out in front of them. It's way easier. So the design, the documentation cycle of excellence is pretty brilliant, because as you are more documented, you feel more confident, you're able to attract a higher level client or a higher level talent in your firm, because the best talent is not going to come work for you if you're a crazy mess, okay? They can spot that a mile away. Okay, so when you've got that, you've got the orientation packet, you've got like your band, you got it together, they're like, oh, yeah, okay. They're gonna have more respect for you, for the company, for their role, and their training time goes down, your ability to facilitate their growth increases, which produces wonderful results for the client, which allows you to spend more time with marketing and client relationships, which brings more referrals, and the experience is higher, and then you get better photography from that, and then you're able to attract a higher level client, and then it's just like this whole cycle of awesomeness that just happens. But you know, it has to be done, and it has to be accurate. This is just an example, and I've given this example, forgive me if you've already seen this, it's just one of the like 1,000 different checklists and things that I've developed, but I think it's just a really good one because I talk about the new client checklist. It just sets the tone, like this person does that and that person does this, and just things should feel like that. I don't want you to have to use your bandwidth to figure out what's next. I mean, you know what's next, but don't have to think about it. It's just already there. And again, like Keith said, it frees you up to be creative. It's just done. It's already done already. So this is just an example of that. Strong support staff, administrator, and expediter is key. I did cover that a lot. One thing that I didn't touch on, I talked about their communication skills and their emotional intelligence and maturity and their personal presence, especially their phone presence. But I also think that you really, and it's been touched on a few times here, it's so interesting how we're all kind of saying a lot of the same things, but from a different angle and a different perspective. You want to bring someone on that has an understanding for the level of luxury that you're providing your clients. How many of you kind of butted up against that thing that you can't teach? Yeah? Where they maybe have never had a five-star dining experience or really understood what true service is about. You know, I mean, I guess you could probably try to help them to have those experiences and augment that. But man, do you really have time for that? Just hire someone that's like already has done that. And I know that it can be challenging because some of you come from different parts of the country and the world. Some areas have a more sophisticated populace than others, so you know there are challenges there. But you want to bring on, especially that for that core five team members, they need to know the difference between an elevated experience and a non-elevated experience. Does that make sense? It's really hard to train for that. Yeah, I mean, it's just, unless you want to take them for cruises and to the spa and, you know, no. I don't think so. One expediter, I talked about that, your admin, expediter, and once you're, and this is the thing too, I don't really care how big or small you are. These are the roles. You've got principal designer, junior designer, expediter, office manager. And if you have a more construction, structural, architectural component, you probably have a project manager that is that interface between the on-site installations and the structural stuff, okay? I don't really care how big or small you are. Those are the pieces. That's the engine. And I want you, as you grow, to understand what those roles are. So I don't care if you're wearing all the hats right now or two of the hats and the other person's wearing the other two hats. I want you to know when you're switching hats. Okay? I want you to go, I'm doing the junior designer role because I'm calling in a CFA. Okay? It's important because when you scale, that transition is pretty seamless. Because you're not like, oh, should we have them do that? Or, you know, like it's just there. Oh, yeah, this is the junior designer role I've been doing half of it, and that person's been doing half of it for the last 6 months. But I'll train you on this half, and that person's going to train you on this half because this is the role in its entirety. The scale is easy, and you know, staff members and staffing is disruptive enough. So that transition is important. So I want you to understand the roles and understand when you're doing it. And I actually want you to think in your head when you're doing something that you know is not the principal designer role. I want you to be like, oh, this is the designer role. They should be the one actually calling this in and figuring out what the tile square footage is. Okay, you know. So that's what I have to say about that. These are all the things that you need for each role in the firm. I have them if you want them, you know, but this seems so non-important, I think, to a lot of designers. It's actually really important because that orientation process, as I said, really determines the quality of people that you are able to attract to your firm and keep in your firm. And so be very clear about that and very intentional about that orientation process. I mean, you should have a clear list of job description, accountability chart. You should have a training checklist of these are the things you learn. This is the person that's going to teach it, check, check, check. Because they're disoriented. They don't know what they don't know yet. So having that like, oh, I'm halfway done through my training, that helps. Employees need structure. They need structure. They have a job because they want safety, security, and structure. That's your job. So they need these tools to feel secure, okay? You can see me in the back if you're interested in getting the documentation that I've talked about. All of this is kind of done. I also provide other kind of guidance and that kind of thing. And usually when a firm is struggling, maybe they have a few team members and it's just not clicking in, it's usually because some of the roles are not that well defined. Do you want me to go through the roles? Do you want to hear each thing? Okay, so I'm going to ad-lib because it's coming from memory, but I'll give you it in a nutshell. We already went through the principal designer. So junior designer is the person that you have assigned the project to. They need to be very strong. They need to be someone that can represent your brand, okay? And depending on the type of work and the scale of project is going to determine the experience level you need of that person. But basically, they're accountable for that job. And I don't care if you only have one, so every job's assigned to them, they're assigned that job, okay? And you are in charge of guiding them in terms of, I'm thinking, you know, pink taffeta, from Baker, or, you know, this and that. I remember that project, we want to do that, except, you know, in more muted tones. You provide that guidance in that Tuesday morning meeting. You provide that guidance during the post-client meeting session, and then they literally, your designer should be able, with your guidance at intervals, implement all of it with the support of their junior, which is their right-hand person. So red line CAD drawings, if not do CAD, should be very familiar with all of the coordination that goes between the laborers and the contractors, the installations. They should be able to do full tile layouts and all of that. They should know those tiny little interdependencies that happen when you change a sink or a backsplash, because that tile doesn't have that fitting for, I mean, I'm not a designer, but I hear these stories about, like, they're like, are you thinking, because you can't have that copper sink if you did that, like, pull it together, man. So they should get that. And they should also be a very good delegator. You might have to train a designer on delegation, because they are going to have to learn that skill so that they can lead their junior. They're the ones confirming all of the proposals. The junior designer is usually the one doing a lot of the data entry. I've even seen it work with a few modulations. I've seen it work with the expediter admin doing some of the data entry, but you have to be careful with that, okay? But it is possible. The junior is entering in all of the data, sending it off to the designer. The designer is confirming and finalizing those proposals, reviewing it with you, making sure it's good to go, and it goes out. Okay, you get the confirmation in from the client, and the designer is in charge of, like, that, a lot of that interaction, and you are oftentimes going to be in those meetings because you've got to sell those goods, right? Whether it's them sitting in the meeting or most likely you sitting in the meeting, they're responsible for the change order and just do the shift. Okay, we're going to do it this way. We're not going to choose that green. We're going to go right? And pop it out again with the help of their junior if they need it, right? Juniors are doing all the stuff that doesn't require the high-level design that you're paying whatever dollars an hour for. CFA orders, reserving fabric, running errands. They're in charge of like all of the memo samples and all of that. I mean, I think you guys know they're the runners, and also they can help with the CAD. Most of the kids out of school are pretty good at that. That's like the one thing they actually do teach fairly. I mean, you guys experiencing that they can kind of do that. So, but again, it's the designer assigned to the job that's responsible for overseeing their work, okay? And then they can present it to you during the design meetings. Does that make sense? Is that kind of mirroring what you already do?
Julia,
Yeah?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I am a rowing business.
Mm-hmm.
So I have 3 team members, myself, Allison, and Katie. And right now,
What are their roles?
I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
I'm the principal. Allison is my senior designer, title, which will be your designer.
Mm-hmm.
Katie is my junior designer. Allison also is my admin, and Katie is also, she will be the expediter because she takes care of first order
You are never going to, well, I shouldn't say never. It's going to be exceptionally challenging for you to grow with that model. So I shift that model most of the time. I really like there being that intermediary role of the expediter that lives in between the designer brain staff and the very linear brain admin staff, accounting staff. They're like the good in between, and oftentimes it's just all with the admin. That is, I'm so glad you asked that question, because that is generally combining the admin and the creative into one role is only effective about 2% of the time. And that is because there's only about 2% of the population, and that mirrors my experience in the field, that have a very strong left and right brain combo brain. You find it more frequently in architecture firms.
I have my engineer and designer who travel and do purchase orders and invoices to assist my admin, and it's like it's constantly a struggle because they don't have that aptitude. They should just probably make anything right there. It's, I already know this is just one of their words. It doesn't result.
No, it doesn't.
And I need more support.
Yes.
I need the support of that and other things. But it's getting sampled and doing other stuff.
Yeah, it works. And you know what? It keeps the design team in their zone of genius. Okay, so they're really good at that. Keep them in that pre-proposal phase. They're responsible for that part, and then they pass it off to the other half. Again, the only reason you needed them to kind of be the one in charge of that is because you didn't have a good centralized operating system where you can control it without doing it. Once you implement that, you can control it just fine without actually having to do it. Okay, because I know that you have to control it. I mean, that's what they're hiring you for. Okay.
Julia,
Yeah.
whose role is it during the design phase to work out pricing that you would put into a proposal?
This is the designer, for sure. I mean, they should be seasoned enough. It's not a junior where they're like, oh yeah, let's spend $10 million on this wallpaper that they will never be able to afford. You know, the designer should have enough experience to know what that budget is. And by the way, figuring out your monetary and timeline goals at the beginning of the project, that little checklist, you work that out with the designer assigned to that project. It's one of the first things you do. Okay, you figure out where you're spending your money. Chandelier is going to be focal point. We're going to spend our money in this room. We're going to move it over here. Okay? Is that enough on rolls? Okay. Uh-huh.
We only have one hire. You're saying we should be the expediter?
Yeah? Wait, say that again?
If there's only one hire, we only hire one person.
Oh, your first hire. You only hire one person? Your first hire, I strongly recommend for 95% of you, it's going to be the admin, and it's usually not what you do. It's the admin expediter role. Okay, you know the designer, you're more comfortable hiring that role and you don't want to have to go pick up memo samples and stuff, so I get that. But man, you get so bogged down on the admin side, it sucks your business of all your profit because you're just wasting it. You're bleeding out this admin. You're not that good at it. You generally don't enjoy it. I mean, I know it might be one of your very favorite things to do, but you're probably not as good at it as somebody else. So hire an admin expediter. I'll get to you in a second, Angela. Hire an admin expediter and figure out, for those of you who are like, I don't want to overextend myself. You figure out what they cost an hour, and you figure out how many more hours you need to bill per week to make that money back plus some. It's an easy formula, and you know what? It usually comes out to like 7 more hours a week or something ridiculous. You're like, well, if I'm not having to do this, money in and money out, and print out that report and call the vendor and da-da-da-da, I'm like, of course, as long as you've got a pipeline with work in it, you're good. Just say to yourself, I'm billing 7 more hours. Normally I bill, 20 hours a week or 40 hours a week or, 100 hours a week, because I know you guys are working that many hours, and I'm sure you're billing for every hour that you work, right? So So yeah, just figure out what that number is. It's easy math. And usually when I work that out with my clients, they're like, oh, well, I can do that. That's not actually very hard. And by the way, they don't have to be full-time. Monday through Thursday, like opening, like whatever it is, 9 to 2, half days. Awesome schedule. It feels like full-time. Most productive hours that you are paying for. They don't work on Fridays because no one's worth anything on Friday anyway. Angela.
Hi.
Hello.
Before I ask my question, I hope this is appropriate, but I wanted to say in front of the group that you absolutely changed my business, and to me it was almost as if you handed me six-figure income, and I mean I didn't know how to do it without your help, and I always felt like I'm bright enough, I just need somebody who specializes in this, and we sort of met kismetly, and I wasn't lucky enough to even know what you were up to, but I just want to say thank you, and I think the world of you, and I just love you so much, and thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you guys are so sweet. You'll make me cry. Thank you. Thank you. You know how like you feel when your client walks in and they're teary-eyed and they're amazed at what you did. That's what you just did for me. So thank you so much.
So my question is, as you know, I'm sort of doing a little bit of changes with my team, and so I was ready to hire I worked somebody up to a senior and was looking at doing the 5-person piece, and then sort of the rug fell out from underneath me and the designer decided to get into real estate. So,
yeah.
Okay. But so in that type of scenario, Julia, would you suggest that you, and I found a senior that I really want to hire, but I need some basic stuff done. So would you recommend that, I heard you say junior designer before senior, but is there any way that you could maybe bring them both on and then make sure their time spent in another company, or maybe the junior's part-time and the other's full-time? I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, it's going to really be dependent upon your pipeline. Right.
It's
full.
healthy.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I'm scared, because it's 2 positions.
I think you're ready for that. And some of you, when you've got that wave, and I've been talking about this for 2 years. Be ready for the wave, 'cause it is coming. It is here. And we don't necessarily know how long it's going to last, right? I mean, no one has a crystal ball. But man, catch it. Catch it. So speed is key right now, okay? That's why it's all about aligning for growth, because you're just going to make a big difference. The next 3 years for everybody, we're going to be able to see in 3 years where everyone is, the ones that caught the wave and the ones who didn't. So this is not the time to paddle slowly, okay? So if you've got the pipeline, and you have that talent presented, and that's where kind of energy and having that confidence that comes from build it and they will come, when you have the system and you know exactly what you need from them. When you post for a job, this is key. I mean, I've done it all for you already, and you shift it. Everyone's got a little bit of a nuance, but that job posting and the clarity and discernment that you have when you know exactly what role and what strengths you're going to need in that person, it makes a huge difference who you attract into your company. The energy totally shifts in your firm completely. So you will attract something more clear, and you'll certainly be more discerning. You know how you want to hire everybody because you love them, and they're sweet and they have some strength. Oh, that person does that, and I don't know. I can kind of do, Okay, that's going to kind of go away, because you'll be like, oh yeah, that role, I need them to be really good on the phone. I need them to be really succinct in the way they speak. I need a designer that's very methodical. I notice that. And there's some tricks that I share, usually one-on-one, about how to spot that and how to test for that in an interview. And it's different for each role. Because you really are, and I've been studying, again, emotional intelligence and Myers-Briggs. And so it's really interesting. It's such a personal thing. It's not like something I have a big giant template for everybody. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But for certain strengths and a principle, you need a certain support personality, a complement. And it's different for everyone. So you learn that, and all of a sudden it's so clear. You're like, you know what, she was a sweet girl, but she's made for this job. And it's just easy, fast. And so your energy becomes really clear. Did I answer your question? Hire them both if the talent comes to you. Make sure that they're right, okay?
Yeah. And then you were going to go into office manager and expediting difference.
Oh, yeah. So office manager is the one, so the expediter, I'm going to kind of move from the design side to the expediter side. So the expediter side is in charge of that comings and goings of information to and from the vendor to the design team. They're that conduit. Now, I don't want them in charge of the very complex install kind of things that really you need the designer part of, but when you're talking about goods, not necessarily hardwood floor install, I mean, that's not really, an expediter's not going to go out on site and make sure it's right, you know, but they can certainly order furniture and wall coverings and place those orders. They're not making the orders, they're placing the orders, okay? And when you have another admin, they're not cutting the check, they're submitting PO for check. It goes in a certain folder at a certain time, and they get a check stapled or, you know, paper clipped, and then they place the order. And they report, usually they enter in estimated ship time, estimated arrival, and they report every Monday morning in that team sync. How awesome is your team going to feel when they've got an expediter admin or just expediter, that is going to tell them at the beginning of their week everything that didn't arrive, everything that's a little bit delayed, you know, have a report for them of things that just came in, is logged into the warehouse. And the designers all of a sudden know that if they don't hear about it, they don't have to worry about it. And if there is anything that is an issue, someone is going to tell them. What a relief that is. They can just not worry about that unless there's something to worry about. And then if something is delayed or back ordered for 6 weeks and it's going to affect the install, or there's an extra 5 at the end of something and it looks weird, and are you sure you want 500 yards of wall covering and not just 50? Like, you know, or there's an issue with the die lot or something like that. The expediter just passes it right on to the design team again, okay? So they're not the detectives and trying to play back and forth. Well, the designer just told me da-da-da-da-da. No, because that's where mistakes happen. It goes back to the design department until it gets kicked in because it's ready to be ordered because it's been revised, okay? You don't want them to have to be an expert at something that they don't know that much about. That's where the big problems come, and you waste a lot of money in mistakes, okay? Admin, I love it when the admin will take care of, I love it when the admin takes care of your scheduling. How many of you have that already? How awesome is it? How many of you are afraid to have someone do that for you? A little bit. I can't do my own scheduling anymore. I think Molly can attest that I'm just completely bad at it now. So I really, if something needs to get scheduled, I pass it on to her to schedule it. There's occasions where I can open up my own calendar. It's on my phone. Everything's synced. Again, centralized information system. I can update it. She can update it. Everybody can see it. And I can add something in there. It's just sometimes when I add something in there, I double book myself, or I do something that I shouldn't have. But so I generally try to push it onto her. You know, so scheduling, money in, money out. They cut the PO checks. I don't think you need an accountant. I mean, most of the time you have that bookkeeper that comes in and whatever. I don't think they need to be. If you've got Studio Webware, certainly money in, money out is easy for an admin to handle. Not a problem at all. You would still have the bookkeeper doing the reconciling though at the end of the month, okay? Admin helps you keep track of your credit card receipts. I'm looking at you, all of you. Okay, so I recommend having that little folder, Amex current receipts. Write your little scratchy note, Smith, door handle. I mean, I don't care. Starbucks, well, Starbucks is easy, you know, but those little things, if it has anything to do with the client or marketing or whatever, write your little scratchy notes at the top, put it in that folder. Your admin's responsible for making sure that gets situated, gets entered into the system. If they don't know what it is, they tag you on it, so that when the bookkeeper that comes in and costs you $100 an hour or whatever it is for your area, they're not doing the detective work. How many of you have accountants or bookkeepers that at the end of the month or whatever that are trying to track your, I'm going to use the word crud and mess, track it down for you. And they're just wasting your money, wasting it, okay? So let your admin do that. All of your signature experience and refinement they're in charge of. They have in the system when the birthdays are, when the anniversaries are. You know, they're the ones letting you know that you've got to buy a card for so-and-so because their dog just died, or, you know, whatever it is. They facilitate that. They might not be the person buying the card. Maybe they are, or doing the gift. Maybe they are. Maybe they're calling in the flowers. But they're tagging you that that needs to happen and facilitating that client service process. Okay? And just a lot of little stuff, like keeping track of your magazine subscriptions. Stupid stuff, like, okay, here's one. You know what, is Christopher back here? Christopher Grubb? Is he back? No, okay. So Christopher, I learned this in his office, is, and it's the stupidest little thing, but it just strikes me. You know the magazine subscriptions that come in, and you have a magazine subscription and no one really knows when it's due and renew, and then you get it, like you realize you're getting it like 5 times. I'm like, I just already paid that. And like little things like that, like Architectural Digest, June 30th, or you know, June 2000. Just keeping track of those little things. When your newsletter is going to go out, keeping track, facilitating your marketing process, online process. They're the facilitator, and they're tagging you, letting you know when things need to be processed. Whether it's we need to have that meeting where you record what you want to blog about because this is happening, or we're a few weeks out from your monthly newsletter, or they're coordinating all of that stuff so you can kind of relax and you know that you're going to get tagged when it's about time to start thinking about it. Does that make sense? Did that answer that question? Okay. We really already talked a lot about niche. I'm going to say one thing about this. Quality, service, price. I think I talked about it a little bit last year. You know the model? 2. You can have 2 of these consistently. Choose your 2. And then what I'm going to say about that is work with only those who have those same 2, to the degree that you have those 2. That's where the misalignment happens, okay? Any relationship, any client that doesn't fit, you'll realize that their 2 is different than your 2, okay? They wanted price, and maybe that wasn't one of your 2, or something like that, right? That misalignment. Key characteristics. I've talked about key characteristics so many times. Who already knows about the key characteristics? Just a few of you? Gosh, okay. Make a list of 12 or so adjectives or short phrases that describe the values and your brand. Like, what if your brand was to turn into 12 words, what would those 12 words be? And it's not necessarily your work, it's your brand. So if your brand was suddenly a store that you walked in, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would it represent? Okay? Sophistication, friendliness, professionalism, polish, high quality service, facilitating a healthy lifestyle, you know, like whatever those are for you. And they're like fingerprints because they're never the same. I've done hundreds, many, many hundreds of these. They're never exactly the same. So it's kind of awesome. And then you make sure that everything that you do internally in your staff and externally with all points of contact with your client, whether it's website or logo or brochure or the contract or your finishing process at the end of a project, how you open up a project, they all are congruent and consistent with those key characteristics. So you'll be able to look at your, once you have this, it's your navigate, it's your compass. It's a really easy, I mean, you have it already, but it's a really tangible way for you to just, in no uncertain terms, go, okay, we say that there were these things. Now, I'm going to look at our website. Oh! For a lot of you, it's not, right? It's not congruent. You're like, oh yeah, this doesn't really look that polished, or it's, you know, it doesn't really look very friendly. It's not very approachable, and we're a really approachable firm, you know. So it's a really great way to assess that. I do this exercise in an intensive, and I'm offering that intensive. We're doing another one. I just do them generally once a year in September, where we literally, in small groups, and usually remotely. I have you send all your marketing materials and all your URLs, all your social media, and your key character. I have you do some exercises and you send it in. And then as a group, I mean, I assess it on my own and I have my feedback, but as a group, we look at your pieces and then people guess your key characteristics. It's really fun because you see from another person's perspective how on target you are. It's great feedback. These are just examples of those who I think do a really good job at it, and there's many, many more. And Kim touches on this. She's really, really great at that too. We talked a lot about PR and press. I mean, these are things, these principles, like this is where the focus is for the firms that work really, really well. That's how I started this. These are the differentiators. You handle these 7, you will transform your business and your life. It is transforming. The marketing matrix, how one thing leads to another. Better photography leads to getting published better. The photography is kind of in the center. It's the hub, in my opinion. Spend your money on the photography. And I hope that panel yesterday was really helpful for you. Was it? Yes. Yeah. It's key. Without those really great photographs, it's like you can't really do all that much. It limits you, okay? We've got about 10 minutes, and did I touch on some of the areas that were helpful for you as a group? Yes? Okay, because we can go in a million different directions. I want to talk about billing though, right? We need to talk about billing? Yeah. Okay, we've got about 6 minutes. Okay. I'm holding all my speakers to, you got to be on time, and now it's my turn. I got to be on time. Okay, so I recommend, I'm going to start with what I recommend for the most part. This is the thing, it's a landscape, and there's no one-size-fits-all for billing. And this is the funny thing, because again, I work with such a span of designers from around the world, and the conversation is generally something like, what's the best billing model? And I'm like, there is no best billing model. That's why you can't find it. There's a best billing model for you, and you have to figure out what that is. So, okay, I have every model that works really well, except for maybe flat fee. There's only a very, 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 very few on the upper echelon that do well with solid flat fee. And you've got to overbill, basically. You've got to charge too much to cover that. I've seen so many people lose their tails in that model a few years ago. I cried for them, okay? So, and time billing is a really great model, and some people, it's the old model, time billing plus 35% or whatever it is, right? It's a great model, and I've got people that still do that and make more money than the rest of y'all, okay? But a couple things come with that. One is you have to have that command, like Kelly, that confidence, and you've got to be efficient, and you've got to know you're worth that rate. This is the thing that happens, because I see it all the time. You raise your rate because someone told you you're supposed to raise your rate, and you're worth it. And then what happens is you, don't track your time all that well, but when you do, you get the number, and then at the end of the billing cycle, Office Manager also does time billing. They track that and do the reporting every month for you. Big one. Anyway, they see that number and they're like, oh my God, my client is never going to pay me $7,000 for the month, or whatever it is, $10,000. It's all scaled, whatever that is for you. And there's that threshold where you're like, okay, I'm going to shave 5 hours off of that. We're not going to bill on that, and we're going to shave that off. And really, that shouldn't have taken that long. We're going to shave that off. Okay, so you know what you just did? What did you just do? Yeah, you just charged the regular amount. Didn't really get you too far. So you've got to be worth it, for real, not just psych yourself out. You really got to be worth it. Your office has to be kick-ass, okay? And you can do it. So then when that number comes up, you've got the strength to stand there and go, yeah, actually, yeah. If you want to see the report, you're welcome to it. I also recommend putting your hours at a premium and then tiering it. I think most of you are these days. So, you know, it's standard model, Prince Senior. I want that to be pretty high so they're glad when they don't see you on site for a measure, okay? Okay, that's okay. And then it puts you at an expertise level. And then the senior and designer, junior, tiered down. And expediter, I do believe you should be billing for the expediting. I do. It's the huge time, but it should be at a reasonable rate. I mean, it's like, for most, it's going to end up being somewhere between 65. I've even seen as low as 55. I would not go below 55. And up to, like, topping out at 85 CAD, 85-ish, depending on where you are. I mean, New York, San Francisco's elevated. You've got areas that are certainly elevated. But this is what I think. I'm going to spend 2 minutes on this. Yes, Vanessa, I do know it's 2 minutes. Okay, so this is it. And some of you might be familiar with it, it's the hybrid model. I think you deserve, for most projects, you can get the best of both worlds. And that is, establish yourself as an expert, okay? It is not about the time you spent in that concept. You know why? Because the longer you've been doing this, the better you are at it, the less time it takes, the less money you actually make. Because there's a certain threshold that you can't charge $1,000 an hour at a certain point, you know? And so how do you bill hourly when you're saying, okay, I'm going to bill you for 10 hours and 40 years? You know, you can't do it that way. So it's and again, thinking like I want you to identify with the expert consultant. Your designer, certainly that is your expertise, but position yourself as an expert consultant because that's where they want that expert, okay? And so it's not about the time, it's about your masterpiece. That's the design concept, that's the fee, okay? And then everything to implement and do the design development, that's preliminary selections, concept, and then there's a certain point where they sign off and say, yes, we love that. Make that happen. And then it switches to implementation phase. And implementation is time built. And implementation is exactly where the flat fee got everyone in trouble, right? So you charge a premium for that early phase that you can, sometimes you crank that out. It's like, oh my God, I'm a genius. This is brilliant. Right? And then everything to implement and make it actually happen is on an hourly basis at a very fair rate. It feels equitable, you know? Does that make sense? I've got these contracts. I got all this stuff. Anyway, I'll be back there. If you have any questions, you can always call my office. This is what I do. That's what I do every day. It's what I love to do. And I can say, I'm not saying it in an arrogant way, but I can say, maybe with the exception of Keith in some ways, I know this. I know it. I've been doing it for 10 years. It's my gift. And I've seen every permutation. I've seen everything. So sometimes there's a little shift that goes, and it clicks in, and you're like, oh my God, that made all the difference. So please see me as a resource. And it's that love and that knowing of how to kind of bring this whole industry forward. It's just sometimes it's a few inner workings that just need to click in, and it just kind of sets you free. And it's a beautiful thing. And my gift really is to help you give your gift to the world. You know, I'm like, that's my thing. And I'm hoping that the Bold Summit is an extension of that. I know I don't know everything, but this, yeah, I know this. So anyway, was that helpful? Was that good?